For centuries, we have repeated their name as if it explained something. The Immortals, a word that suggests certainty, continuity, lives without endings, an elite that never diminished, never aged, never disappeared. History, we're told, recorded them clearly. A unit so perfectly maintained that death itself seemed irrelevant. And yet, almost everything we think we know about them comes from a distance, from outsiders, from fragments, from descriptions written long after the people themselves were gone. What survives is the name. What it promises is permanence. What remains, when examined closely, is far less stable. This episode is not about proving who the Immortals were. It is about noticing how quickly a name becomes a belief, and how easily belief fills the spaces where certainty ends. The Immortals appear in historical accounts tied to the ancient Persian world, most often associated with the Achaemenid period. They are described as a standing group of 10,000. When one member fell, another took his place immediately. Their number never changed. The total remained intact. That, at least, is the outline. What we have are references. Greek writers mention them in passing. Reliefs show rows of figures, nearly identical, frozen in stone. Later, historians repeat the description, refining it, embellishing it, sometimes contradicting one another. No roster survives, no internal records, no voices from within the group itself, only a designation, and a story that fits remarkably well with how humans imagine endurance. The question is not whether such a group existed in some form. It likely did. Large organized formations were not uncommon in that era. What matters more is how quickly a practical structure transformed into something mythic. The term, often translated as immortals, may not have meant what it now implies. Some scholars suggest it referred simply to completeness, or continuity, or a fixed total. But translation is never neutral. Words travel. They pick up expectations. They bend toward the listener's imagination. Once the word immortal entered the story, the meaning shifted. A logistical detail became a philosophical one. Replacement became resurrection. Maintenance became eternity. From that point on, the group was no longer just a unit. It was an idea. Descriptions emphasized sameness, uniform appearance, coordinated movement, a visual rhythm that suggested more than discipline. It suggested erasure of individuality. In relief carvings, faces resemble one another closely. Clothing repeats. Posture aligns. Whether this was intentional realism or symbolic stylization is unclear, but the effect is unmistakable. When difference disappears, continuity feels plausible. When one figure replaces another without visible disruption, the illusion of permanence takes hold, and illusion is often stronger than fact. We should pause here, because this pattern is not unique to ancient Persia. It appears again and again across cultures and centuries. Groups remembered as eternal are rarely documented from within. They are preserved through repetition by outsiders. Their image stabilizes precisely because their reality is inaccessible. What cannot be verified cannot easily be corrected. Over time, uncertainty hardens into legend. Accounts of the Immortals describe precision, ritualized behavior, a kind of predictability that reassured observers. Even their equipment is described with careful detail, as if to anchor the story in material reality. And yet, these descriptions come from writers with their own perspectives, their own distances, their own reasons for emphasizing certain traits over others. We are not reading a mirror, we are reading a projection. When historians look for the Immortals, they often search for confirmation. Archaeological traces, administrative records, patterns that align neatly with the story. What they encounter instead are absences, gaps, evidence that resists alignment. The name remains, but the structure blurs. Were they truly a single permanent group, or a category applied to different formations over time? Did the number matter more symbolically than practically? Did those within the group think of themselves as immortal, or Was that label imposed from elsewhere? These questions remain unanswered not because they are unimportant, but because the evidence does not resolve them. And so, the legend persists. There is something deeply human about this persistence. We are drawn to systems that appear stable, to forms that promise continuity despite loss, to structures that suggest the whole survives even as parts vanish. In a world shaped by impermanence, the idea of an unbroken line is comforting. The Immortals offer that comfort. They suggest that replacement can be seamless, that death does not interrupt function, that the pattern matters more than the individual. But this comfort depends on distance. It requires that we do not see the faces too clearly, that we do not know the names. Individual stories disrupt the illusion. They introduce endings. Legend smooths them away. If we imagine the Immortals as they are often portrayed, we imagine them as interchangeable. A body without a biography, presence without memory. But this is a constructed image, a visual solution to a conceptual desire, the desire for something that does not change. History rarely provides such things. When it seems to, we should look closely, because what appears unchanging is often only undocumented. Consider how repetition works. When the same description is copied from one account to another, authority accumulates. The story gains weight through familiarity. Soon, questioning it feels unnecessary, or even disruptive. Yet repetition is not confirmation. It is inheritance. And inheritance can carry distortions forward intact. The Immortals may have been a carefully maintained formation, or a ceremonial designation, or a numerical convention, or something else entirely. What matters is how the idea of immortality attached itself so firmly that it eclipsed the uncertainty beneath it. Once attached, the name reshaped interpretation. Every depiction became evidence of sameness. Every absence became proof of continuity. Even silence was recruited into the story. When records do not contradict a legend, we assume they support it. This is a mistake we make often. Silence is not agreement. It is simply silence. Archaeology has not uncovered a definitive structure labeled as immortal. Inscriptions do not clarify the term. Administrative texts, where they exist, speak in the language of logistics, not myth. The more closely scholars look, the more provisional the story becomes. And yet, outside academic circles, the legend remains remarkably intact. The Immortals are invoked in books, documentaries, films. They are imagined as flawless, disciplined, eternal. Their appeal has not faded. This raises an uncomfortable possibility. Perhaps we are less interested in who they were than in what they represent. An idea that transcends individual fragility. A system that absorbs loss without acknowledging it. A pattern that persists regardless of the lives passing through it. This is not a historical conclusion. It is a psychological observation. We gravitate toward images that resolve our anxiety about disappearance, but resolution is often an illusion. If we strip away the legend, what remains is something more ordinary. Humans organized into a structure, maintained through replacement, remembered through repetition. There is no shame in this ordinariness. It does not diminish the people involved. It only challenges the story we tell about them. The problem arises when we mistake the story for the thing itself, because once we do, we stop noticing the cost. Every replacement requires a loss. Every continuity hides an ending. Every appearance of immortality depends on someone else becoming invisible. The historical record rarely records those invisibilities. It records names, titles, totals. It preserves the outline, not the experience. And so, the Immortals endure as a shape without interior, a legend strong enough to survive uncertainty. At some point, the group disappears from the record entirely, not abruptly, not dramatically. They simply stop being mentioned. There is no account of their end, no description of dissolution, no explanation. The Immortals do not die, they fade, which may be the most telling detail of all. because fading allows the idea to remain intact. Death would require explanation. Absence allows imagination to continue, and imagination prefers continuity. We are left, then, not with answers but with a pattern, a name that promises permanence, evidence that resists certainty, a story that grows stronger as details vanish. The Immortals exist most clearly where knowledge thins. This is not unique to them. History is filled with figures and groups whose clarity increases as their reality recedes. The less we know, the more confidently we speak. The more distant the past, the easier it is to believe it resolved questions we still struggle with. Here, the inquiry turns inward. Why does the idea of an immortal group feel so compelling? Why does continuity reassure us more than truth? Why do we prefer a stable legend to an uncertain reality? What part of us needs to believe that something can endure unchanged, even as everything else dissolves? Perhaps the question is not who the Immortals were. Perhaps it is why we keep needing them to be immortal. Because as long as they are, something else doesn't have to be. And as long as the pattern holds, the individual loss feels easier to ignore. The truth, if there is one, remains incomplete, fractured, resistant to closure. What survives is not certainty, but repetition. And repetition, when left unexamined, can feel like truth. The Immortals remain where history ends and belief begins, not as an answer, but as a quiet reminder of how easily permanence is imagined and how rarely it is confirmed.